Okay, good evening. A very full house this evening for a very special guest. We're very honored to have you with us, Mr. De Wever, on what seems to be not only your first visit to New York, but even your first visit to the United States. And as you may know, Mr. De Wever is in town for the Mayor's Forum, a highly exclusive gathering hosted by Mayor Bill de Blasio. And later this week, he will travel to DC for discussions with Homeland Security teams specialized in Muslim community and counterterrorism. Ladies and gentlemen, Bart De Wever is leading the new Flemish Alliance, N-VA, since 2004. He also served as a representative in both the Flemish and Belgian parliaments, and since 2013 is mayor of Antwerp, the largest city in Flanders, and allow me to add, in my most humble opinion, also the coolest city in the country. Next to being a seasoned politician, Mr. De Wever is also a historian, a Latin lover in the linguistic sense, study of the year twice, a finalist in the hugely popular Flemish TV quiz, The Smartest Person in the World, and renowned for his dry sense of humor. I think my mic is sort of interrupting. I hope everybody can hear me clearly. It is, however, in his capacity of mayor of Antwerp that he's joining us today to talk about international entrepreneurship. Mr. De Wever, welcome. Antwerp is a major hub for international trade, not in the least through its world harbor. And with trading volume of 21 million tons, the US are an important partner for the Port of Antwerp, which is continuously strengthening Houston. And through various collaborations with universities and research centers, Antwerp has also produced a multitude of interesting new companies with global reach and or international potential. So more than enough reasons for a Q&A session, which I would like to kick off, but then I would invite all of you as well to chime in. I know that there's a lot of interest and a lot of questions from people around the table and in this room. Mr. De Wever, Belgium, of course, is represented abroad through its regions. There's FIT, there's AWEX, there's the Brussels Trade Commissioner, there's Visit Belgium, Visit Flanders, which isn't always the most effective way to attract investors, visitors, and can actually be quite confusing at times. So I was curious to know what your view is as the mayor of Antwerp, and also maybe how that might differ from the stance of the N-VA.
Okay, thank you for inviting me here and putting a lot of pressure on me through your introduction. I'm haunted by my jet lag. The second day is worse than the first, apparently. But I'll try to be coherent in my answers. We'll do it in English, I believe?
Absolutely, thank you.
Okay, I heard in your tone of voice a slight criticism that there are a lot of institutions representing us abroad and trying to attack foreign trade. I think that's certainly true. Has to do with the form of Belgian federalism. The strong federations of the world, like Germany and the United States, were all federations that grew bottom up, from independent states to a federation. Belgians did it the other way around. That's quite important if you want to understand how ill it is organized. The competences were not transferred through a blueprint plan, but through tough political negotiations. 6 state reforms took a lot of political energy, were compromises made during the night in which part of competences were transferred to the one and to the other, and then they had to make it work. And if you look at certain fields of government, it's quite complicated and it's a lot. And if you add political competition add to that to attract investments or to be the one landing the deal, or in the media to be apparently the one landing the deal, and other politicians very angry because it's their institution that did the preparating work, and it's a bad situation. It's not good. If you look at the logic of state reform, the state reforms of 1988, 1993, foreign trade is a regional competence. It's a regional competence, and for 25 years. So I think Flanders Investment Trade is doing quite a good job. Is the starter problems of not cooperating with federal services, diplomacy, I think we're over that now. When I visited China, I was amazed of their beautiful cooperation. So I think it works. Also with AWACS, the Walloon counterpart, how is it called? It's AWACS. I think the cooperation is not bad. Should it be reorganized? Should it be better organized? I tend to agree with that. You simply have to decide who is going to take care of it, and then you have to let go at other levels. But that's the big problem. The other levels seem to always reinvent themselves, and certainly abroad to give themselves a new role, a new institution. We have we even have a Minister for Foreign Trade at the federal level, although the competence is not there. I wonder what he does all day. And I think I'm not the only one. How does he fill his days? So everybody is trying to make himself useful, so they're getting in the way of other initiatives, and gives a lot of political tension. So we should reorganize it. It's just a question of deciding which level is going to take care of it and leave it there. But of course, if you talk about attracting investments, foreign trade, you will never escape from the logic that even if you organize it at a regional level, as it should be, if you look at the state reforms, you will stump into matters that are at the federal level, like fiscal policies, social security, and you will always have to implicate federal services. That's unavoidable. Second element is, of course, as long as diplomacy is at the federal level, there will be would he do, aside from the normal diplomatic duties and administrative duties that he has to take care of. I'm happy that every free second that he is at the disposal of our economical interests. So even if you, certainly the political tensions around it are quite tiresome and a bit childish from time to time.
And is it something that, do you see any kind of initial thoughts as to how that could be better organized?
Well, unfortunately, you would need a new state reform. If you are all for organizing it at the federal level or at the regional level, no matter which direction you want to go, you need a new state reform. And that's not on the political agenda for the next few years. We made a coalition government which is quite unique, but which holds no two-third majority, and which is quite new in the sense that it holds no majority whatsoever in one part of the country, which means that you do not have a majority of the Francophone speakers in the federal house, which blocks effectively any institutional reform you might want to do in whatever direction you want to do it. So no, there will be no initiatives taken. What you can do, of course, is try to make it work as it is, and there's a margin for improvement there. I think if you a little more of political adultness, you use the word adultness, would help already a lot. I think it's even as a mayor, I'm implicated in economic diplomacy. The diamond sector asks me all the time to do stuff for them. We have the port, of course, we have the petro. Then you can make it work. But of course, if your main focus is trying to convince voters that you are the one who attracted the foreign investment and created jobs, then you get in trouble all the time. And unfortunately, we're exact.
And in light of all this, would you rather see a Flemish-American Chamber of Commerce?
Now your smile betrays me that this is a very dangerous question you're asking me.
You're a guest in our house.
Well, as a guest, I want to be very polite and not interfere in how private companies organize themselves. So that's totally up to you, how you want to organize yourself. Of course, you can make a strong case for putting it. Doesn't really matter to me. I would come if you would invite me either way.
Great, and I think that's a perfect bridge to actually talking a little bit about entrepreneurship. entrepreneurs can move very fast in the US, and you know, if you just take, for example, real estate here in New York as an example, you know, projects
in a city that's quite dynamic, and if you look at the New Jersey development over the last 15 years, it's amazing. If you are in China and Shanghai and stand on the Bund and you look at Pudong and they say 15 years ago there was nothing, then you think, well, we should speed up a bit at home. Of course, you can see the downside of it walking through town very, very quickly. The things they built, the things they're still building, the impact on the city, on mobility. You see the total free market, but we're a bit strong on the opposite side of that one. Even for those who know my city, the Singsenvoor. It was a tragic story, just finding a place for an old institution like the Singsenvoor to give it a place in the city is become extremely difficult to do it. If you talk about big investments like in our mobility, I'm happy to see mobility here is quite an issue as well. It's virtually become impossible to hold on to it during 10 years, but in 10 years there's a lot that can change. And every 2 years there's somebody who pops up with an even better plan. Melius inimicum bonum est. The better is an enemy of the good. And every better plan finds support, and then you get, we're at a point where something needs to be done. There is a lot of political awareness around this point. There's a lot of political will to evolve towards faster, to give permits faster, to be a bit more free market, bit more business friendly. At the city level, we try to do what we can. We are giving our social system, but which is costing us competitivity. And if we are not careful, we wind up in a situation like Japan, where you have eternal stagnation, because the weight of your system has become so large and the weight of your debts has become so large that you simply cannot outmaneuver it anymore. Here, the flexibility of the labor market, that's an example, not to be copied, but at least to be studied. And of course...
and do you think there's enough money available for Belgian startups and scale-ups to get funded and grow?
There certainly is there's a lot of cash. The question is who dares to invest it. And you need a startup system. We're working on that at the city level because we saw that a lot of potential simply left the country. So we need to try to facilitate. It's not the government who does it, not the city government who does it, but facilitate an ecosystem for starting companies. And we're pleading at the federal level for copying systems like tax shelter, and at the last professionally organizing our external relations. My external relations officer, Luc Mailhart, is sitting next to me. You might know him from his previous life as director of the National Bank in the Antwerp branch. So for the first time, even at the political level, we have a contact point for all companies saying, well, we need the city to be our facilitator. You can help us, and we try to do so. We're reforming our city taxes to make them more transparent, trying to lower them, to make them more business friendly. But of course, we have the biggest maritime industrial complex in the world. Mm-hmm. It's not me as a mayor that's really going to make the difference to attract a company like ERS, who will hopefully will make a huge investment in the petrochemical cluster. It's a long time ago that we attracted grassroots investments. We have a big cluster which is a good thing, but because it's a capital-intensive sector, so it's not easily relocated. But in fact, the only investments we attracted the last 10 years are investments in existing plants. The cluster was not growing anymore in terms of grassroots investments. For the first time, we're trying to land a major multi-billion euro investment in a grassroots new company. It's not me as a mayor that can really make the difference. There you need reforms at the federal level. But I'm, of course, not only the mayor. Some say that I have a certain influence at other power levels, which is often exaggerated, but it's not totally untrue. So I'm happy with a government who is at least focusing on cutting labor costs. and advocating another message abroad. There was an Ernst & Young study presented last week that only the psychological effect of a government focusing on labor costs, focusing on job creation in the private sector is already very important. Although the measures we have taken, we're going to cut about 4.5% of the labor costs, are not extreme, certainly not from the Anglo-Saxon perspective. Yeah? If you explain to a British politician what we are doing, they're not blown away. Yeah? They did other things. If you would explain an American investor our fiscal climate, he would not be very impressed. We're doing an effort, but very far from what they have here. But at least we're doing an effort. That's enormously important. Mm-hmm. And to underline that stability, fiscal stability is important. And if you're going to make changes, the intention of the change is to lower fiscal pressure. That gives an opportunity. I'm fairly optimistic. We see our growth figures going up again. The expectations are quite good. We have the euro, which is quite low. It's a bad thing if you come here, I must say. It's city is expensive. Yeah. That's my impression. It's expensive. But for our export, it's excellent. Crude is low, so the conditions are not too bad if we keep reforming and keep focusing on our cost structure and reforming in the long term, so that you have a perspective of a sustainable social security. Then there's no reason to be pessimistic. Quite the contrary.
Great. I mean, you mentioned the maritime industry. I mean, what about the harbor? I mean, are you looking mostly towards Shanghai or Houston, or what?
Well,
what's the?
We've been focusing on the Far East for the simple reason that there's a lot to be gained there. We are already the first port of call for North America. Most of the goods that go to Europe, we have more than our fair share. The same cannot be said from the Far East. There it's Rotterdam, who is the first port of call. And we are trying to expand there. There's a lot of expansion to be done there. So we've been focusing on our relations with Shanghai. We are a sister city of Shanghai since 1984, which is a huge advantage. We were there when there was nothing. So they know that it's not solely when you're becoming rich and powerful, it's easy to make friends. But we were there even beforehand. That's one good thing of having socialist mayors in the past. They wanted absolutely to be friends with communist cities. At that time we were violently against it and protesting against it, but now I can say in China, well, I was your friend already in the 1980s. We were already here, and we've been focusing there. We had a high-level delegation from Shanghai coming. The city, the party secretary was there. So we're optimistic, but it's not that we're forgetting North America. It's simply that we see more margin to expand and grow and attract more trade and lines there. And also because we are, we really need to look into as port cities in allying with other big port cities against the shippers. Because the concentration in the shipping world is becoming so big and they're becoming so powerful that if they throw the dice, they can make you or break you. And you need, in the checks and balances, I think we need to try with the big port cities of the world to make a counterpower. And Shanghai is not a bad partner to do so.
Yeah, and then obviously when we talk about these big cities and countries, we think about large trade agreements between the Port of Antwerp and its partners. But how do these big trade agreements also benefit the smaller and mid-sized companies?
Well, if TTIP and the trade agreement with Canada, what was it called? CETA? CETA. No, yeah, CETA, CETA. If it can tear down tax barriers, I'm all for, and everybody can benefit from that. I'm a free trade politician, so any agreement that could facilitate trade, like the seafood trade between Canada and the Port of Antwerp, it's a good thing, and we would welcome it. We're trying to, with it, focusing on our strong sectors in Antwerp, but we're desperate. We're very keen on attracting value-added investments, and that's been lacking for in the previous period, the previous 5 years. There was hardly any private job creation. attract, and like the Churchill Industrial Zone where the Opel factory used to stand. That's some solid gold real estate we have on the right bank. And in Antwerp, the right bank is the right bank. The fact that we've not been able to attract a new industrial player who creates a lot of added value, then you're in bad shape. Now, for the first time, we have different dossiers that we're looking into to create or to attract an investor that can create a lot of added value. And if you have free trade agreements, helps a lot.
Yeah, and then smaller ones can serve on the waves created by the big companies.
Of course, that's how it works.
Slightly different question, but what is your biggest personal entrepreneurial achievement?
My personal? I'm a professional politician. I studied Latin, Greek, and after that I went to major in history. What does that tell you about my entrepreneurial skills? They are non-existent. I worked at the university and then I became a professional politician. I live on the taxpayers' money. I've never... I have to go back to my student years when I actually worked for a living during summer. So my entrepreneurial achievements are, let's say, limited.
I'm sure there must be some entrepreneurial mindset, because for anyone to overcome challenges, you know, it's not just creating a company in the, you know, in the narrow sense of the word, but more broadly, you know, there's obstacles you have to overcome. So there must be something there that could reflect this.
Underlining again that I work with the taxpayers' money, so I sleep very well every night. I have not my own money riding on my business, but I once was the co-founder of a very, very small political party that nobody gave 2 cents for its chances of survival. And 10 years later, it has become rather successful. It's maybe the period is too short to make a final judgment on where we're going, but at least it grew, and it tries to take up the party responsibilities at different levels that nobody imagined possible even a few years ago. We formed a federal government which is quite unique. It's the first government since 25 years without a socialist party in it, and without the French-speaking socialist party in it, and which is trying to change socio-economical policies in our country. If you would call that an entrepreneurial achievement, then it's an achievement. It certainly would be the biggest in my personal life.
Fair enough. I'll ask one more. I think I've given you plenty of time to think about your questions. So I wanted to ask you, I mean, it sometimes saddens the Belgians of us living here to see that in several of our cities in Belgium, the crime rates are going up. And if you compare that to a city like New York, which is very, very safe, I would love to have your perspective on any learnings that you can take. I mean, not just for Antwerp, but more broadly, cities in Belgium in that regard.
Well, I'm happy to say that the crime rate in Antwerp is going down. It's not going up. In 2013, when I started, it was going up. 2011, 12, and we were at a very high level. In 13, it dropped 3%. In 14, it dropped 8%. In 2015, up till now, let's touch wood, it's dropped 23%. The chief of police is here. How much are we searched? 23%. So the reorganization of the police force in Antwerp is really giving us some good results. We're copying a lot of things that were done here as well. Certainly increasing the police visibility and presence in the streets. So we've made some tough reorganization because our budget is it's difficult. So we're not spending more money on the police. We're pro capita spending a lot less than New York, a lot less, but they're spending billions here. But we have to make we cannot leverage on the budget. We need to leverage on the organization, but we're doing so, putting more people in the street. We've adopted the Singapore system of sending police officers in civilian clothing, which is quite successful, the arrest teams, which creates the illusion that the police can be everywhere. even if you do not see them, you're not certain that they're not there. We've made a special squad focusing on the on drugs, not because people always think it's just focusing on people who using drugs. But every evidence that we've studied shows that if you try to dismantle, you will never be able to get rid of drugs. You cannot win a war on drugs, but you have to wage it, because it's an economic war. And if you wage it, you see all other forms of crime go down with it, because it's of course the drug users who are the perpetrators of violent robberies to get the money to buy the drugs. If you can dismantle the drug trade or disrupt it, you immediately see the effect on other forms of crime. The one thing we are having a lot of trouble with is burglaries. That's very, very difficult. We've had a drop in the first year, but it's stabilizing and even going back up again, because that's what we call import criminality. It's not perpetrated by people living in the city, but people that come from abroad, Eastern Europe, to perpetrate these crimes. And even if you arrest them, the next day there's a new crew that continues to do so. But in fact, our figures are not that bad.
So is that different from the other big cities in Belgium? I mean, you've mentioned a few of the solutions and measures you've taken.
Mm-hmm.
Could that then be a solution for other cities in Belgium where definitely crime is a problem?
Well, we hold the Secretary of Internal Affairs trying to reorganize the federal police as well. So I'm not that pessimistic about crime rates in Belgium and in the Belgian cities. That's one of the main reasons we're here. We visited the FBI field office in the meatpacking district. Quite some good real estate. I don't think they will be there for much longer. And then the NYPD, we just came from them. Finding out what are you doing exactly with homegrown terrorism, violent extremism, which is becoming, alas, a challenge. We're spoiled in that way. We haven't had any violent extremism since the 1980s and extreme left terrorism. We're waking up with a new phenomenon, and we've been learning a bit about how they are addressing this problem here. But we were happy to see that in other police tactics, it sounds all very familiar, and that technologically we need to copy a few things that they have here, but we're working on that already. If you look at camera surveillance, they're ahead of us. Not only in the amount of cameras, but also the technology behind it, what they did with it, and they joint ventured with Microsoft, which was intelligent, because now they will gain money if they sell the system to us to make the video feed, because you have such amount of cameras, who's looking at all the images. But if you make the cameras intelligent, then of course you can gain a lot. And that is what we're copying at this very moment. And I think it's very smart to go into business with a private company and then regaining the money if you find a model that you can sell to other cities in the world. That's very smart.
I think that's a very reassuring message. Let me pause here, and if you wouldn't mind, yes, if you wouldn't mind just very quickly introducing yourself. Yes, absolutely.
If anybody wants to ask a question in French, please do so. My French is
I won't because
worse than my English, but
I won't because I'm an American.
Oh, okay.
So I'm fat, I'm loud, I'm arrogant.
You
so
can speak French if you want to.
Un peu. Mayor De Wever, welcome to America, welcome to New York. Thank you for starting your stay here at the September 11th Museum. That meant a lot. I know it meant a lot to your people abroad. Your timing is perfect because 2 days ago was the anniversary of D-Day, and without the Port of Antwerp, D-Day would not have been possible. So your timing is excellent to come back to America, and thank you. There are some Americans among us, myself included, my friends in the military, that still remember that, so thank you. I'm a New Yorker. Our mayor is a moron.
I meet him tomorrow. Will I pass?
Reserve your judgments.
Will I pass the message from you?
Happily, happily. You're obviously not. And the camera system came from Mayor Bloomberg. The Microsoft thing that you're talking about came from Mayor Bloomberg, with a partnership with private companies, as you said. That's all legacy from Mayor Bloomberg. Don't tell him you're not a socialist, because that could earn you points. So he still thinks you're from Belgium, you must be a socialist. You said you're a professional politician. Do you view yourself as a politician? If so, why shouldn't I run away screaming from you as an American entrepreneur? And additionally, what do you hope to gain from your visit to America, and how do you think that will compare and contrast to your previous visit to China? And how can we help?
Why should you? Well, yes.
I have more that I just.
Okay. Why shouldn't you run away screaming? That's a fair question. Well, am I a professional politician? Yes, in the sense that I have no other profession. I have no time to do other profession. You have a lot of politicians that seem to be able to do a lot of private professions next to their political profession. I always wonder how they do it. But I do not want to know, actually, how they do it. Professional politician. I think I've always looked at politics not as a profession. It's a vocation. It's Cicero said it's the highest vocation in life. It's the vocation to the Respublica, to the common cause. And as long as you look at it that way, I think it's a noble profession. But you need to realize that, of course, you are but a facilitator of things. You're not the maker of things. You're not the maker of society. We do not create society. We facilitate society. Society needs us. You need a certain amount of regulation. You need a certain fiscal pressure. You need a certain fairness again. You need some competences organized by the government, like the Justice Department, who cannot be privatized. You need to take care of that, but you need to be very well aware of the fact that it ends there. It does not go any further than that. And that's the mistake that a lot of my colleagues make, saying, well, we want to create jobs. Sorry, we do not create jobs. And the kind of jobs we create are the jobs you just want to avoid. Because those are the kind of job that costs money. Subsidized jobs and jobs, if you look at the job creation that has been achieved, it has worsened our situation. It hasn't improved our situation. So as long as you're aware of what you are and what your role is in the Respublica, I think it's a noble vocation and it's a noble profession. Fortunately, I'm not convinced that the general audience looks at it that way. Not in our country, and if I heard your introduction, it's the same here and maybe even worse. When I walked through the street yesterday and I was followed by some camera crews, some young girls stopped and they thought, maybe it's a movie star. So they didn't recognize me, of course, for obvious reasons. And they asked one of my, who is that? Who is that? And I said, it's a politician. I said, oh, politician. It's bad luck. They hoped it would be somebody interesting, but alas, it was. And they didn't run away screaming. They ran away laughing, which is probably even worse. But that also is a problem. Not the fact that a lot of politicians tend to see their role as something it shouldn't be and isn't. It's also a problem that the general audience has lost faith in the idea that it can be otherwise and that it should be otherwise. I see that as a problem. What do I hope to achieve with this mission? Well, it's not an economic mission. I'm here with a small delegation. That's important, small delegation. I don't know if you appreciate British humor, but if you, Yes Minister, the series Yes Minister, in his first foreign mission, he says, I want a small delegation, and he ends up leaving with a Boeing full of people from the administration. He said, well, I'm relevant for this, I'm relevant for that. I have a memory of understanding, will achieve absolutely nothing, but to sign it, I have to be there. I'm here with only 3 people. The Shanghai mission was quite different, because there we invited not the administration of the city, but the private sector. Say, if I can be of use for you in China, then you could come along. And we had the clean tech sector, the diamond sector, the petrochemical sector, the harbor, of course. We had fashion. They were all there, cooperating. And I was not the facilitator, but the Trojan horse. I hope not. No, I was acting in their play. The Diamond Night, I was there because in China a politician opens doors. It's a state-controlled economy. If they see the big guy, then it's serious, and they send their big guy. There you can make a difference. This is a totally different country. I cannot imagine that an American is very impressed because the mayor of Antwerp is here. So this is not like an economical mission. It's just the mayor's forum. The State Department invited, or the embassy said, well, you should come in to give us a debriefing on all you're doing concerning Muslim radicalization. They're interested in what we do on de-radicalization programs. They're not very far here on that subject. The counter-narrative and de-radicalization initiatives. They wanted to hear all about it, so we're giving debriefing, we're getting information. And of course, now that we're here for the Mayor's Forum, we have to go to Washington, we make ourselves available, but more for partners and organizations here. We've not brought a big show trying to impress anybody this time.
Well, I understand what we're getting out of your time here and what they're extracting from you. But I phrase my question very specifically. What do you hope to gain from it?
Well, I arrived yesterday. So on the Mayor's Forum, I don't know what it will be exactly, because I'm not very keen to go abroad. I'm always flying on the taxpayers' money. You should be very aware of this. I am only convincible. Look, you know this very well. I'm only convincible. If you can say, well, you really need to go. You can make a difference, or you need to be there. I've been 10 years in Parliament. This is my second trip abroad on the taxpayers' money. The Mayor's Forum, I didn't attend the last 2 years, and now it was considered to be so unpolite that the third year I really needed to go. So that's the main reason I'm here. I just added useful meetings to my presence here. Otherwise, I have to come back again and again, and who has time for that? So what I hope to get from it, I'll tell you when I leave. I can tell you that the visit to the FBI field office was very useful, and the way that federal services and local services try to cooperate in a structural manner here is something that we need to set up very quickly in our own country. That was really very useful briefing we had.
Very good. Who has the next question? Yes, let's go there.
A question from the marketeer and the communication advertising man to somebody who is the mayor from a city, and I'm thinking in terms of city marketing. Antwerp as a brand. New York is a great city, everybody knows, center of the world. I think Antwerp and the Low Countries were pretty much involved in the beginning of New York. But there is more with New York. There's many nationalities, and it is a very tolerant city. So I see a lot of similarities with Antwerp. But New York is also a brand, and over the years it became a brand. So I want to challenge you on what are we going to do to help Antwerp become a worldwide strong brand.
Thank you for that question, André. I think you know the answer, but thanks for asking it anyway. I would like to point out for everybody here that André once fired my wife. I want everybody to know that. It was probably a wise decision, André, but nevertheless, my wife reminds me of it quite frequently, that she was laid off by you. And now we're working together, so everything, and in the end, works out fine. And one of the subjects we're working on together is the idea of branding Antwerp, which is an idea which is evident that you try to do it, but it's not so evident to actually do it. An idea like New York sells itself. You call it the Big Apple. Everybody wants to be in New York. Everybody is in New York. Everybody wants to be New York. Everybody adores the city. It's a bit a victim of because you asked when I entered, what were your first impressions of the city? And I saw your disappointment when I said, well, the airport was less organized than I thought. And when I drove to the city, I saw a lot of dirt next to the highway, which is not a good thing. And I thought that for cyclists, it's not the idea. So, no, it's not that bad. It's not that bad. The city is such a strong brand that you expect nothing less than heaven when you arrive here, and it's a bit of a victim of that enormous expectation span. So brand a city like New York, that seems to me like a piece of cake. Antwerp, that's another matter. We've had international research done, and the simple fact is that very few people know Antwerp. We have the disadvantage of not having an iconic site. Big Ben, you're in London. Eiffel Tower, you're in Paris. Manneke Pis, of all things. Yeah, but you're in Brussels. Everybody knows it. Everybody wants to see it for a reason that you cannot imagine when you actually see it. But you know you're in Brussels. Antwerp has nothing like that. You do not have the red bus in London. The things that immediately people attach to your city. So branding the city, what are you going to use? You can use a lot of things, but you can use the port. You can use, but what does binds the city of Antwerp? What makes this? What can you use? What? How do you call a thing where you put your jacket on when you put it in a closet? A hanger. You need a hanger as an idea, one idea to hang all the rest on it. So we developed. What we did, is we invited the private sector, and we talked to them for about a year. So, well, what do you think? What do you think? And then we attracted the Belcham, of course, as a professional marketeering company to think on that. And what we have adopted and try to will develop into policy now is the idea of presenting us as a typical Antwerp, because we were the most important city in the world in the 16th century. It's a surprise even to many people living in Antwerp when you say that we were the most important city. They say, well, you're joking. No, we were. We had 120,000 people living in Antwerp, which is more than London and Paris combined at that time. And economically and culturally, we were the center of the known world at that time. And we are atypical because we kept the metropolitan spirit in the city. We have one of the largest ports. We have the biggest maritime industrial cluster. We have the second largest petrochemical cluster in the world. We are the world capital of diamonds. In the city, that's frowned upon the diamond business, but I can assure you, if you go abroad, you're happy to have a product like that to open doors. That's atypical for a city who only holds 500,000 inhabitants. So the idea of being atypical Antwerp, and envers atypique, it works in every language, is the hanger. And we're going to, we are cutting the budget for our internal communication, which was quite high, and we created a budget for external communications. And we're going to now start with the first campaign, A Typical Antwerp, when we hold the summer festivities, trying to attract more visitors, trying to attract more students coming to study in town, trying to attract more investors, trying to attract everybody who needs to be there. So we'll see if it's a success, but at least we're going to try to brand the city the next few years.
My name is Ben Flamel. This is not a joke.
No. Who would joke about that? Huh? Who would say that is his name if it isn't the case?
I've been here a long time. Started at the Zinc, but was also an advisor to the Antwerp Diamond Bank in private equity. You just mentioned the industry. We deal with a lot of international investors, including Belgians and people from Antwerp. I think you're part of the reform of the capital gains tax. And I was wondering if you could elaborate on that and the impact it might have.
On the capital gains tax, I think you overestimate my knowledge of the financial sector. I'm really not an expert. I have a perfectly capable minister for that, Johan van Overtveld. I personally am not an expert. The only thing I'm focusing on as a mayor is try to restore the funding of the diamond sector, because you know that the Antwerp Diamond Bank is winding down. It's going out of existence, and that we need a new funding institution for the diamond industry. And the problem with the diamond industry is that it is so frowned upon by the politicians, the media, and general public, that it's not very popular to make an effort for the sector. So in all discretion, at this very moment, we're trying to get the funding reorganized of the sector, and I'm optimistic that we'll get there. But which are financial reforms, the reform of financial markets, I would have to ask my neighbor, who used to be a bank director, who wants to say that he's that if he isn't after 2008, who could elaborate on that. But I'm too afraid to say something very dangerous if I go into that.
All right. Yes, all the way in the back. If we pass the mic there, and we actually had the pleasure welcoming the minister here last week. So for those of you who weren't here, we were able to. Yes, he was here exactly 1 week ago.
Q&A session as well?
And he presented his book of Giant Reborn.
Yes.
You weren't there to ask him the question. He could have given you a very intelligent answer, I'm sure.
Good evening, Mr. De Wever. My name is Axel Klissen. I'm a Belgian architect. Been living here for a year and a half, and I'm very interested in the city, how a city as New York works. And what I've noticed is that New York is the US in general could be seen upon as a melting pot of different nationalities, different cultures, and so on. New York is, of course, the example of that in US. And I see a couple of similarities between cities in Belgium, such as Antwerp, such as Brussels. And I'm wondering if I see how different cultures, different nationalities live so well next to each other here in a city as New York, I'm wondering what lessons can be learned from that as a mayor from Antwerp, as a mayor of a very multicultural city in Belgium at least. So I'm wondering what your perspective, your take on that is.
Well, if you talk about diversity, in Antwerp we have 173 nationalities living together in one city of 500,000 people. That's what perfect example of the metropolitan spirit that has been there and has always stayed there since the 16th century. Together with Amsterdam, that's the most diverse cities you can find in the world, and comparable to what you see in New York. Only the numbers are, of course, much more impressive. Here in New York, you can find even cultural habits that have disappeared in the home countries and still exist in Brooklyn and Queens, I've been told. It's quite impressive. And how do you make it work? How do you make them all live together? I think the key issue to that is citizenship. You need to make a clear distinction between your private culture as a private person, not meaning that there's no room for your private culture in the public space, but there needs to be a clear distinction between private culture and public culture. And public culture, on public culture you need to establish citizenship. Not only formal citizenships rules, but also the spirit of citizenship. You need to have the general idea that you're bound all together in citizenship. And I think that's the secret of New York. You come to New York to become a New Yorker and to be a New Yorker. The driver coming here from the Dominican Republic, which led us to Brooklyn, where we did not have to be, so he didn't know the way in New York. But when he introduced himself, he left me with the impression that he was a proud New Yorker living here for all of his life. I think he arrived last week or something, because he took us on a scenery tour. But that's the idea. You want an atmosphere that people want to be a part of. If not, even if you can get them to obey the rules, you get stuck in a situation of apartheid. Not apartheid organized by the government, but by the people itself. And you have to be realistic about that and honest about that, and acknowledge that in the last immigrant waves to hit Europe since the 1960s, we have been unsuccessful to advocate or promote and have adopted this idea of citizenship, of Respublica, the common cause. Respublica, the word publica says it all. And that a factual situation of apartheid in our cities has grown with these recent immigrant groups, making it very difficult for them to get economic mobility. What you see, the traditional economic mobility is that first generation arrives, needs to do whatever job they're offered, whatever job they can, 2 jobs. Next generation moves up, third generation, you see the integration. Not the integration that they are assimilated, because they're always there, but integration in the sense that they become part of the community, and that their culture spreads towards the community and forms a new synthese. How do you? Synthesis? Oh, that's the idea of immigration has always been that you go towards a new synthesis in which the newcomer does not disappear in the old, but shapes a new community where if you visit the UK and you know what to look for, you can find the Scandinavians everywhere. They're in the English language, they're in the architecture, they're everywhere, but they're gone. There's a new community. The English before the Scandinavians were another community than after their arrival. That has always been the successful immigration model. And now we're at the fourth generation of the most recent immigrant waves, and we kind of lost the way because we're steering away from that. We're going farther from it. If you look at pictures of the first generation arriving, they looked more, the look and feel of those people, I saw the pictures when we had the exhibition on 50 years immigration, they looked more like the people living there than their grandson and granddaughters do. So we've kind of lost the way towards the new community. We've kind of lost the way towards the sense of citizenship and the idea of wanting to be a part of something. And if you want to reverse that, I think that the cities can play a crucial role. Cities hold the future of humanity. In 100-year times, 2/3, you're an architect, or even 3/4 of the global population will live in cities and city areas. And I think if you want to restore citizenship, a city is not a bad place to begin, because it's where you live and where you have your neighbors and where your kids go to school and where you work. And if you can at least there create an atmosphere of focusing on what binds all the people living there, then you're a step ahead. And of course there New York is a remarkable place, because it seems to absorb people at a pace where you are Monday living in the Dominican Republic and or Sunday, and on Monday you try to convince people that you can drive them around the city, which unfortunately you can't. But maybe you can in a year's time when I come back.
Well, I think that's a very inspirational and aspirational note to close on. I mean, obviously, stay around, have a beer or another drink, and mingle some more. But I want to thank you, Mr. Mayor, for making the time for us. I would even say more. The mayor is coming back here on Wednesday for a meetup of Atelier. So, you know, you'll be our guest again on Wednesday. But thanks again for fighting the jet lag, making time out of your busy schedule, and hope you'll stay around for a few more minutes. Thank you.
Thank you.